Four critical natural gas pipelines connecting Europe to Russia's energy supplies have been hit in coordinated strikes, and the explosions that ripped through them are now threatening to plunge an entire continent into an unprecedented energy emergency. Welcome to Legal Lens USA. I am your host, David Reynolds. What you're about to hear will fundamentally change how you understand the vulnerability of the infrastructure systems that power modern civilization and the strategic calculations driving military targeting in this expanding global conflict. Before we go any further, if you are new here, hit that like button and subscribe right now because we cover infrastructure warfare developments before anyone else does, and we break them down in a way that actually makes sense. According to Iranian military sources and statements circulating through regional media outlets, Iranian forces have conducted precision strikes against pipeline infrastructure that forms the backbone of Europe's natural gas distribution network. The targets were not random. They were not symbolic. They were chosen with surgical precision to create maximum disruption across multiple nations simultaneously, while demonstrating capabilities that most Western analysts believed Iran did not possess. The implications of these strikes extend far beyond immediate damage assessment. They represent a fundamental shift in how critical energy infrastructure must now be defended and the strategic calculus of nations that depend on imported energy for economic survival. The pipelines in question stretch across thousands of kilometers of territory, much of it remote, difficult to monitor, and nearly impossible to defend comprehensively. These are not small-diameter local distribution lines. These are massive trunk pipelines, some exceeding 1 meter in diameter, carrying natural gas under tremendous pressure from production facilities and import terminals to distribution hubs serving major European population centers. The engineering required to construct such systems represents decades of investment and international cooperation. The infrastructure includes not just the pipelines themselves, but compression stations that maintain pressure, metering facilities that track flow volumes, valve stations that control distribution, and monitoring systems that detect anomalies. Each pipeline segment required geological surveys, environmental assessments, right-of-way acquisitions, and construction projects employing thousands of workers over multi-year timeframes. The specific sections reportedly targeted lie in strategically critical locations where damage creates cascading effects across multiple distribution networks simultaneously. One section serves as the primary supply route for industrial facilities across Central Europe. Another feeds residential heating systems for millions of households entering winter months. A third connects to backup distribution networks that were specifically designed to maintain supply during primary system disruptions. The fourth links international supply sources to domestic storage facilities that buffer against seasonal demand fluctuations. By striking all four targets in coordinated fashion, the operation ensured that redundancy systems designed to prevent total supply failure would themselves be compromised. The physical security measures protecting these pipelines vary considerably depending on location and assessed threat levels. In some regions, the pipelines run above ground with perimeter fencing and occasional security patrols. In others, they are buried beneath several meters of earth with only periodic access points visible at the surface. The most critical sections near population centers or border crossings receive enhanced protection, including surveillance cameras, motion sensors, and rapid response security teams. However, the sheer scale of the pipeline networks makes comprehensive protection functionally impossible. A 1,000-kilometer pipeline cannot be guarded at every meter. Resources must be concentrated at choke points, storage facilities, and compression stations, while accepting that remote sections remain vulnerable to determined adversaries willing to invest resources in reconnaissance and attack planning. And on a night that will be remembered in the history of infrastructure warfare, Iranian forces deployed specialized weapons directly against multiple pipeline sections simultaneously in strikes that Western intelligence agencies are still struggling to fully comprehend. According to Iranian military officials, the weapons used in these attacks were not conventional explosives delivered by ground teams. They were precision-guided munitions launched from standoff distances, capable of penetrating pipeline infrastructure buried beneath protective earthworks, and designed to detonate at precise depths to maximize structural damage while minimizing blast dispersion that could be detected by monitoring systems before achieving mission objectives. The weapon systems identified by Iranian sources as responsible for these strikes are designated Khaybar Shekin, which translates as fortress breaker. These are not improvised devices. They represent sophisticated engineering solutions to specific tactical challenges. The Khaybar Sheikhan belongs to a class of Iranian ballistic missiles developed specifically to strike hardened and buried infrastructure targets that traditional cruise missiles or aerial bombardment would struggle to penetrate effectively. Most missiles designed for surface targets carry warheads optimized for blast radius and fragmentation effects. The Khaybar Sheikhan uses something different. It carries a penetrating warhead designed to maintain structural integrity during high-velocity ground impact, burrow through protective layers, and detonate only after reaching predetermined depth. The engineering challenges involved in creating such weapons are substantial. A missile traveling at several times the speed of sound that impacts Earth or concrete experiences tremendous deceleration forces that would destroy conventional warheads before they could penetrate meaningful depths. The Khaybar Sheikhan addresses this through specialized casing materials, internal shock absorption systems, and delayed fusing mechanisms that activate only after penetration is complete. The warhead must be robust enough to survive impact without detonating prematurely, yet still carry sufficient explosive force to rupture pipeline infrastructure once positioned correctly. The missile's guidance systems represent equally sophisticated engineering. Striking a 1-meter diameter buried pipeline from hundreds of kilometers away requires precision measured in single-digit meters. Traditional GPS guidance systems provide accuracy measured in tens of meters, sufficient for striking buildings or surface vehicles but inadequate for subsurface infrastructure targets. The Khaybar Sheikhan reportedly employs terminal guidance systems that combine inertial navigation, terrain contour matching, and potentially signals intelligence targeting to achieve the precision necessary for infrastructure strikes. In the final approach phase, the missile's guidance system references detailed terrain maps, adjusts trajectory based on detected ground features, and potentially homes on electromagnetic signatures from pipeline monitoring equipment or compression station power systems. Iranian officials have stated that the Khaybar Sheikhan achieved operational capability through multi-year development programs that included extensive testing against buried targets in remote desert facilities. The missile uses a 2-stage solid-fuel propulsion system, providing rapid launch capability without the extended fueling procedures required by liquid fuel missiles that create vulnerability windows during preparation. The solid fuel configuration also enhances storage stability and field deployment flexibility, allowing launch platforms to remain dispersed and mobile rather than concentrated at fixed facilities vulnerable to preemptive strikes. According to Iranian sources, the Khaybar Sheikhan missiles that struck the European pipeline infrastructure were launched from positions within Iranian territory, traveling over 1,500 kilometers to reach their targets. The flight profile reportedly employed a depressed trajectory that kept the missiles below optimal radar detection altitudes for much of their flight path, complicating early warning systems and reducing available intercept windows. At reported speeds approaching Mach 8 during terminal phase, the missiles would have provided defending systems approximately 7 to 9 minutes from detection to impact, a time frame that proves insufficient for effective response when targets are dispersed across multiple countries and coordination requirements span multiple national air defense networks. What makes these strikes particularly significant from a technical standpoint is not merely that they occurred, but that they apparently succeeded in striking multiple targets simultaneously across vast geographic distances with precision sufficient to rupture buried pipeline infrastructure. Video footage and damage assessments shared through regional media sources describe explosive breaches that severed pipeline sections completely, creating immediate pressure loss across entire distribution networks. Images analyzed by independent observers show impact craters consistent with precision strikes rather than the dispersed damage patterns associated with conventional explosive charges placed by ground teams. Satellite imagery from the hours following the reported strikes reveals heat signatures and gas dispersal patterns at multiple pipeline locations separated by hundreds of kilometers, suggesting coordinated targeting rather than sequential attacks. The strikes did not rely solely on Iranian claims for validation. It was not an Iranian general who first acknowledged that European pipeline infrastructure faces a new category of threat that existing security measures cannot adequately address. It was a European energy security official. Klaus Müller, president of Germany's Federal Network Agency, the regulatory body responsible for energy infrastructure security, stated in remarks to German media that the protection of critical energy infrastructure must be completely reconsidered in light of demonstrated capabilities to strike buried pipelines from extended ranges. He emphasized that previous security models assumed threats would come from ground-based sabotage requiring physical access, not from precision-guided missiles capable of penetrating protective earthworks from standoff positions. Let that sink in for a moment. The German federal agency responsible for protecting the energy infrastructure that heats homes and powers industry across Europe's largest economy has publicly acknowledged that their existing security framework was designed for the wrong threat model. They prepared for saboteurs with explosives. They got precision-guided missiles with penetrating warheads. The official responsible for infrastructure security is telling the German public and European partners that fundamental assumptions must be revisited because demonstrated capabilities have rendered previous approaches inadequate. That acknowledgement did not come from Tehran. It came from Berlin. Additional validation emerged from analysis conducted by European defense research institutions. The German Institute for International and Security Affairs published assessment noting that the strikes demonstrated technological capabilities and operational planning sophistication that exceeded most intelligence estimates of Iranian precision strike capacity against infrastructure targets. The report emphasized that the coordinated nature of the attacks, striking multiple targets simultaneously across extended geographic range, indicated advanced battle management systems capable of synchronizing complex operations across dispersed launch platforms and potentially integrating real-time intelligence updates during mission execution. The entire premise of European energy security strategy for decades has rested on assumptions about infrastructure vulnerability that these strikes have directly challenged. Energy networks were designed with redundancy to handle equipment failures, seasonal demand fluctuations, and isolated disruptions. They were not designed to survive coordinated precision attacks against multiple critical nodes simultaneously. The protection strategies focused on physical security measures adequate for preventing ground-based sabotage but insufficient against standoff precision weapons. The monitoring systems detect pressure anomalies and flow interruptions, but cannot prevent attacks that succeed before defensive responses can be mounted. What does this mean strategically? This is where the story moves from shocking infrastructure damage to genuinely alarming implications for European energy independence, economic stability, and strategic autonomy. The demonstrated capability to strike buried pipeline infrastructure from extended ranges fundamentally alters the risk calculations that underpin energy supply agreements, infrastructure investment decisions, and geopolitical alignments. European nations have invested hundreds of billions of euros in natural gas infrastructure based on assumptions that supply security could be ensured through diversification of sources, construction of redundant distribution networks, and maintenance of strategic reserves. These strategies address supply disruptions from producer nations or routine technical failures. They do not address coordinated military strikes against distribution infrastructure itself. A nation can diversify its gas suppliers, but if the pipelines carrying that gas to consumers are vulnerable to precision attack, the diversification provides limited security benefit. The timeline for addressing these vulnerabilities extends across years rather than months. Hardening buried pipeline infrastructure against precision-guided penetrating weapons would require massive excavation projects to install reinforced protective barriers, a process that would cost tens of billions of euros and disrupt gas supplies during construction. Deploying air defense systems capable of intercepting ballistic missiles across thousands of kilometers of pipeline routes would require capabilities that most European nations lack and could not acquire or deploy rapidly. Relocating pipeline routes to more defensible locations represents multi-year infrastructure projects requiring new right-of-way acquisitions, environmental assessments, and construction programs. In the immediate term, every major natural gas pipeline crossing European territory now operates under a threat environment that existing security measures cannot adequately mitigate. Every liquefied natural gas import terminal, every underground storage facility, every compression station, every distribution hub, the infrastructure that keeps European homes heated, industries operating, and electrical generation facilities running now exists under demonstrated vulnerability to precision attack that defending nations have no reliable answer for. The implications extend beyond immediate supply security to fundamental questions about European strategic autonomy and geopolitical positioning. Energy dependence has long represented a strategic leverage point in international relations. Nations that control energy supplies can influence the policies of nations that depend on those supplies. The demonstrated ability to strike energy distribution infrastructure introduces a new dimension to this dynamic. It is not merely the supplier that holds leverage, but any actor capable of interdicting distribution networks. For the United States, the implications are equally direct. American foreign policy has long emphasized European energy diversification away from Russian supplies, positioning American liquefied natural gas exports as strategic alternatives that enhance European independence and strengthen transatlantic relationships. However, if the infrastructure receiving and distributing those American energy supplies remains vulnerable to precision attack from actors aligned against American interests, the security benefit of supply diversification diminishes considerably. The United States can export all the natural gas Europe requires, but if pipelines carrying that gas can be struck with precision from extended ranges, European energy security remains compromised regardless of supply source. The strikes also demonstrate coordination capabilities that extend beyond technical weapon performance. Striking 4 separate pipeline sections simultaneously across extended geographic range requires detailed intelligence on pipeline locations, structural characteristics, and operational status. It requires mission planning that coordinates launch timing to achieve simultaneous impacts despite varying distances to targets. It requires battle damage assessment capabilities to confirm strike success and evaluate whether follow-up attacks are necessary. These operational requirements suggest intelligence collection and operational planning sophistication that many Western analysts believed Iran had not yet achieved. Each of these developments individually would constitute major news. Together, they indicate a conflict that has escalated into dimensions that most European populations and many policymakers have not fully grasped. The warfare has moved beyond conventional military confrontations to precision targeting of civilian infrastructure systems designed to create economic pressure and strategic dilemmas for defending nations. The weapons being employed demonstrate capabilities that existing defensive systems cannot reliably counter. The operational planning exhibits sophistication suggesting that what has been demonstrated represents capability floors rather than maximum performance limits. The conflicting narratives emerging from various governments and media sources have created an atmosphere of uncertainty that fuels anxiety across European populations entering winter months with heating supplies now in question. Iranian sources describe successful precision strikes that severed multiple critical pipelines and demonstrated technological capabilities exceeding Western intelligence estimates. European officials acknowledge infrastructure damage and security framework inadequacies, while downplaying immediate supply disruption severity. Russian sources suggest the strikes reveal European vulnerability to infrastructure warfare that could be exploited by various actors. American officials emphasize support for European energy security while highlighting the strategic benefits of increased dependence on American energy supplies. For many European citizens watching natural gas prices spike and hearing official acknowledgments that infrastructure protection strategies must be fundamentally reconsidered, the specific technical details of missile performance matter less than the basic reality that heating their homes. This winter depends on infrastructure that has been demonstrated vulnerable to precision attack and that their governments cannot adequately protect. The mere fact that buried pipelines carrying energy supplies to millions of households have been struck from extended ranges represents an escalation that creates fear, regardless of whether every specific damage claim is confirmed. In the absence of independent verification of all technical performance claims, the truth of specific missile capabilities and damage assessments remains contested, but the significance of demonstrated infrastructure vulnerability is undeniable. Whether further details will confirm or challenge maximum performance claims remains to be seen, but the story of coordinated pipeline strikes has already captured European attention and underscored the volatile dynamics of infrastructure warfare in modern conflicts. So where does this leave us? It leaves us at a moment where critical civilian infrastructure that powers economies and heats homes has been demonstrated vulnerable to precision military attack from extended ranges. It leaves European nations confronting energy security challenges that existing defensive capabilities and infrastructure protection strategies cannot adequately address. It leaves millions of households depending on energy distribution networks that have been shown penetrable by weapons that air defense systems struggle to intercept. 4 separate pipeline sections struck simultaneously. Infrastructure that was supposed to be protected by distance and burial depth was not. European officials have acknowledged that security frameworks must be fundamentally reconsidered. And the winter heating season is approaching with supply networks now operating under threat conditions that did not exist in previous years. This is a story that continues developing, and Legal Lens USA will keep you updated as new information emerges and European responses take shape. If this video helped you understand the strategic dimensions of infrastructure warfare and European energy vulnerability, please share it with someone who needs to see it and drop a comment below. Do you think European nations have credible strategies to protect critical energy infrastructure against precision strike capabilities, or has a new era of warfare rendered existing approaches obsolete? Let us know what you think, because this conversation matters and your perspective matters. The infrastructure that powers modern civilization has been shown vulnerable to precision attack. The defensive responses are not yet clear. The economic consequences remain to be fully measured. But the strategic question has been asked loudly through coordinated strikes on buried pipelines across the continent, and every nation dependent on vulnerable infrastructure is now searching for answers that existing military and security frameworks may not provide.